Welcome to the Sober and Happy Podcast. My name is Tim and I'll be your host. The goal of this podcast is to take you through my journey of getting sober, how I've overcome the difficult challenges that I've faced along the way, and how I've gone from a life of simply just being sober to a life where I am both sober and happy. In this episode, I want to continue the discussion on forgiveness. In episode 3, we really focused on the steps we could take to work towards making right the wrongs we have done in our past and working towards receiving forgiveness from others. If you haven't listened to that one yet, I would suggest going back and listening to that episode first. In this episode, I want to focus on some of the things I have done to forgive people that I have been hurt by in my life, and then finally, what it looks like to finally forgive ourselves, so we're no longer weighed down by our past. One of the first things I did in the process of navigating the things that happened to me in the past was to look for patterns where I've been putting myself in a place to be harmed. This is no way placing blame on yourself, but rather looking for patterns that we could recognize so we could reduce the chance of recreating that situation in the future. This is also not to avoid living either, but living smarter to not constantly put us in the same place where we have a high likelihood of repeating the past. Let me give an example to better explain this. I had a lot of anger and resentment around past relationships I've been in where I felt I was hurt for no good reason. After one relationship in particular ended in a very similar fashion as some of the past ones, I wrote off relationships forever, assumed I just had a bad kicker, and carried around a lot of resentment for the women that have hurt me in the past. Anytime anything would remind me of one of my exes, all the emotions around being done wrong would come up. Anger, sadness, jealousy, depression, you name a negative emotion, and I felt it deeply. And if I sat with that long enough, it would start growing. I may start being mad at one particular ex. Then I would get mad at all of them, along with anyone who was actually happy in a relationship. Then I would start thinking I was cursed in the love department. And before you knew it, I was angry at the universe for dealing me a cursed love life. This could happen in a moment and could last hours, days, weeks, or even longer. As you could see, sitting in a fit of resentment was causing me nothing but harm. With help from a good therapist, I took a look at my relationship history. Early on in my dating, I would get crushes on friends that were in bad relationships. I would be the supportive friend, the shoulder to cry on, and eventually, when they would leave the boyfriend that treated them badly, I would swoop in and be the nice boyfriend who was going to treat them right. In several of these relationships, they would ultimately decide to give the ex another chance, and I'd be left heartbroken and confused. In retrospect, I realized that I was putting myself in a relationship that was almost guaranteed to end badly. These women I dated didn't have a chance to heal from their last relationship and move on. Several of them were in years-long, on-again and off-again relationships with these men, so it was naive to think they wouldn't repeat that cycle. After a few of those heartbreaks and not understanding why they were happening at the time, I developed a long list of insecurities about dating. That caused me to be insecure, jealous, needy, and completely inauthentic in relationships because I was constantly trying to be the guy I thought they wanted me to be instead of being myself. That led me to have many short-lived relationships because I honestly was hard to date. I had a lot of great qualities, but the ones I picked up along the way were making it impossible to have a healthy, sustainable relationship. At that point, it didn't matter who I was dating because I personally was not fit to be in a relationship. The point is, until I recognized and changed those patterns in my life, the list of people that I resented and felt did me wrong and therefore did not deserve my forgiveness would only continue to grow. Here's the magic. As soon as I recognized the pattern and had a different perspective on the situation, forgiving all those people I dated in the past suddenly just happened naturally. I had compassion for their side of the situation and just as important, had compassion for myself. I was no longer a victim of my circumstances. I was doing the best I knew how to do in my search for love, as they were also. So look at the areas you hurt from and see if you could learn from the past to try not to put yourself in this situation in the future. Some are easy. If the same person keeps doing the same things to you, it might be time to remove them from your life. Some things require a lot more work, and in my case, a good therapist to help me recognize things I could not see on my own was very beneficial. Now, what about the situations where you simply were a victim? There are times in our life when our behaviors are not a contributing factor to us getting hurt. Many studies have shown that as much as 75% or more of people with substance abuse problems have experienced some sort of sexual or physical abuse as children. There is no need to search for patterns of your behavior in situations like that. One of the biggest issues I had when working the 12 steps was that during the process of working through your resentments, there is a part that requires you to find your part in it. There simply are circumstances where you had no part in it. In those situations, searching for your part could be re-traumatizing and could cause you to be re-victimized, and I believe your efforts are much better spent on focusing on the healing process. So how and why should we forgive people that caused us so much pain? The why is that you deserve to no longer carry that burden with you. You have been carrying it for so long, and your life would benefit so much if you're able to forgive the people that have hurt you. Forgiveness doesn't justify the actions of the other person, and it does not lessen the amount of pain that was caused to you. It also isn't about whether the person is asked for or even deserves to be forgiven. It is about what you deserve. You deserve to have that weight you've been carrying around lightened. You deserve to be able to move on from the wrongs done to you. You deserve to be able to live your best life free of anger and resentment. You deserve to be able to take your power back. You deserve to be healed, happy, content, and free to live your best life. That is what I want for you. And it is only on the other side of forgiveness. I can share with you some of the things that have helped me. There are many paths to forgiveness, so I encourage you to seek out and try several methods until you find what works best for you. It is not important how you do it. It is only important that you do it. The most important factor in my working through my past resentments was finding a good therapist. I tried working through it in many other ways. Talking to friends helped some. I went through the resentment process in AA with sponsors, which also helped some. But as loving, well-meaning, and supportive as my friends and sponsors were, they were not sufficiently qualified to help me process some of the pain and trauma that was involved in some of the events in my life. In fact, I got some very well-meaning bad advice in some circumstances that really set me back. So if you have the means and the ability, I suggest finding a therapist that you feel is a good match and that you trust and feel safe with so that you can be completely honest. It took me a few tries to find that person, and she has been my guiding light in my healing journey. The next critical piece was learning to deeply feel the emotions around the harm that was done and acknowledging the effect it had on me. Much of my drinking was done to try to not feel this. Once I quit drinking and had no choice but to feel these emotions, I looked at other outlets to try to numb these feelings. That is why I think you see so many people jump from one addiction to another. The term cross addiction is often thrown around to explain this, but I think in many cases it isn't about having an addictive personality. It's simply that we have not healed the pain yet and are grasping for anything that could take it away, even if just for a moment. To fully heal, I had to strip away the distractions and allow myself to feel the emotions. This is best done in a state of great compassion for yourself. Compassion for the person that you were when it happened, for the person that you have been up to this point suffering all these years, and for the person that you are now as you finally face the pain. Be gentle with yourself and don't be judgmental. Show yourself the love and support that you crave through this process. Imagine what it'll feel like to finally let go and how much peace you could have on the other side. Use that as your motivation for taking this difficult step that requires so much courage. One of the hardest and most effective ways to find forgiveness is through empathy. I find that most people truly are doing the best they know how, given the circumstances up to that point of their life. I have done many things in my life, especially in the depths of my addiction, that I deeply regret and honestly don't know how or why I did them. I know I would do anything to go back and take away the pain I caused others if I could. Knowing that, is it possible that the people who harmed me feel the exact same way about the things they've done to me? It was only through this mindset that I was able to start the forgiveness process with my dad. He was far from an ideal father, and he caused more harm in his life to others than any other person I personally know. But he also endured severe trauma as a child and throughout his life. This does not justify any of his behaviors. However, it allowed me to have empathy that he was doing many things in his life as a reaction to the things that happened to him and his inability to heal from those things. Hurt people often hurt people. I was with my father in the final moments of his life when he was reflecting on the destructive life he lived. I saw the sorrow in his eyes and the pain in his voice when he talked about so many of the regrets he had about the pain he caused to the people he loved deeply. This was not the emotions of a man that maliciously harmed me and his other loved ones. This was a man, just like me, that deeply regretted his actions and didn't know how or why he did the things he did. The last gift I gave my father was forgiveness, and I know he had a little more peace in those final moments of his life because of it. That brings us to the last step I want to address, and that is, if the circumstances are right, would be to tell the person that you forgave them. I know how much weight was lifted off me as I was forgiven for many of the things I did. And in my experience, it felt just as good to give the gift of forgiveness to others. I will caution that you tread this one carefully, though, and I tend to only have this conversation with people who have asked for my forgiveness. I made the mistake once of telling someone that I forgave them for something that they did. However, they felt that they did not do anything wrong, and hearing them tell me that they didn't do anything that needed forgiveness for set me back in the process. So where circumstances exist where you have the opportunity to forgive someone who is seeking it, I would strongly encourage you to do that when you're at the point where you have already forgiven them. I have barely touched on the many helpful ways that you could begin to heal from your past pain and move to a place beyond resentment. I couldn't do a podcast long enough to get into the depths this topic needs. Once again, I strongly suggest you seek out support in the process in whatever form you can. Therapy, support groups, books, or many of the great articles available at your fingertips, written by experts in the areas of forgiveness and healing. I am far from an expert on the topic and just someone who has experienced it personally. I can't emphasize enough that you use every resource available to you while you navigate this journey. One thing I can say for certain is that you will feel so much better and have a sense of freedom once you begin the process of forgiving others. The last part of forgiveness I want to touch on is how we could start forgiving ourselves. As I mentioned in a previous episode, I heard many people say, and I've repeated it myself, that I can't learn how to forgive others until I learn to forgive myself. My experience, though, is forgiving myself was not so much of a deliberate process like seeking amends or forgiving others, but more through changing who I was. That being said, the one necessary step towards forgiving yourself is stopping the behavior you're wanting to forgive yourself for. You're never going to stop feeling guilty about something you did in the past if you're still engaging in similar behaviors in the present. If you're still feeling guilty about something you've done in the past, where you have the ability to make things right and you have not done that yet, that will be the quickest path to forgiving yourself. If you have not listened to the previous episode, I talked thoroughly about that, and I suggest you go back and listen to it. Beyond that, one of the first steps is similar to forgiving others. Have compassion for yourself and who you were in the circumstances when the act happened. Remind yourself that you did the best you could at the time, given your circumstances up to that moment in your life. If you have changed, remind yourself that you're not the type of person that would do that today. Write out the good qualities you possess today that are the opposite of the person you were then. Forgiving yourself requires a lot of stern conversations with your inner critic that wants to remind you of all your mistakes. Remember, you are not your past. Shift your mindset to who you are today and activate your imagination on who you are striving to be in the future. All that being said, in my experience, forgiving yourself just naturally happens when you change and grow. I don't remember the moment that I forgave myself for some of the things I've done in the past. I just know that over time, I stopped beating myself up so much and started liking myself instead. Knowing that the person I am today would not repeat the behavior I'm feeling guilty for is the most effective tool I have. When an old memory creeps up that reminds me of my past, I could usually stop it in its tracks by simply saying, I have made that right to the best of my ability, and I am not that person anymore. So for me, forgiving myself was about the work it took to get to that point. It will be a process, and it will take time, but you could get there. Be kind and gentle with yourself while you go through it. You deserve compassion, especially from yourself, and I know you could do that. It is time for you to claim your power back and experience the freedom that comes beyond anger and resentment. You're worth it so much, so don't put this off one more day. I hope you have found this episode helpful. If you did, please share it with someone else that you think it may help. I'm doing this because I know a lot of people are struggling in their recovery, and I want to help as many people as I can, and that is only possible with your help. And if you're enjoying this podcast, please also like and subscribe so that more people could join us on this amazing journey. New episodes come out each Friday, so I look forward to connecting with you next week. And as always, thank you so much for listening, and keep living sober and happy.